OceanDecade side event focusing on innovation and solutions to achieve the aims of the OceanDecade. And this event is organized in the context of the Monaco Ocean Week, which I'm sure brings you here in Monaco for the next few days. My name is Julien Barbier. I will be your moderator. I'm also the head of marine policy at the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and I coordinate the decade, together with my colleague Alison Clausen, that I'm sure many of you have been in touch with, who's here. So we are going to start our event, and also we have a live audience who is following us online. So the decade, the OceanDecade for Sustainable Development, Science for Sustainable Development. The purpose of this decade is really to revolutionize or really create a step change in the way we organize, the way we design, the way we partner around science to really develop and deliver transformative ocean science-based solutions for addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, marine pollution, and many other critical ills of the ocean. Of course, technology and innovation is an essential part of that dimension, of that value chain that we would like to create in the next 10 years. The objective of our talk today and of our event is really to explore how technology and innovation are essential to achieving those solution-oriented approach to ocean science. We know that technology and innovation both allow ocean science to be undertaken, but also are influenced and shaped by ocean science. So ocean science needs technology for advancements, and ocean science can also feed in the development of new technology. But when we talk about technology, we're also talking about people. And I think it's very important that through our dialogue we look at the actors that needs to be involved in this co-design of ocean science for sustainable development. And in fact, I think you will see with the panels that we have today, we have a very diverse range of stakeholders who will really explore the links between technology and innovation in more details. So the way we are organizing our discussion today, we will have a first panel which is going to look at solutions that are already being implemented in the context of the OceanDecade and how they are really utilizing technology and innovation, and in some cases, how they hope to be able to influence further technological and innovation advancement. The second part of our panel will look at what conditions we need to nurture and foster the links between technology and innovation and ocean science. So really talking about the enabling environment around those topics. And we will look at questions linked to investments, to co-design, and the central role of the private sector. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. So after each panels, we will have time for Q&As from the audience. So get your questions ready, but we will also be able to take questions from the internet. We will be using the slido.com site. And in there, if you go and use the code OceanDecade, you will be able to raise your questions, and Alison will highlight those through our discussions. Our presentations today is going to be in English, but we can take questions in both French and English. So to get us started, it's also my pleasure to invite Mr. Olivier Vanden, Vice President and CEO of the Prince Albert II Foundation and host of the Monaco Ocean Week, to welcome us, and also a great pleasure to highlight the partnership that we have with Olivier and the Foundation in the context of a decade, and we will be very happy to come next year to under your hosting with the philanthropic network that is working in the context of a decade. So Olivier, my pleasure to invite you to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Julien. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It's a great pleasure welcoming you in person in Monaco after 2 years of digital and Zoom calls. That was a bit unbearable, I would say. So it's nice to see you in person. Thank you to the IOC UNESCO team for having organized this very sound event. And as you may know, ocean science have been a major commitment of the Principality of Monaco for over a century now. Prince Albert I was one of the founders of modern oceanography, and Prince Albert II, the sovereign prince of Monaco, has made the protection of the global ocean and support for science one of the hallmarks of his action through the government, but also through his foundation, which I have the honor to represent. The foundation was launched 15 years ago in this spirit, and following the same approach, it has given a central place to science. Not only does the foundation support very specific scientific projects and initiatives on the ground, but it also accompanies international meetings and organization in order to amplify the role of science among political and economic decision makers. And I think this is really central, and this Ocean Week, for the first time, has clearly positioned the private sector and this interconnection, multidisciplinary approach at the core of the agenda. So at the request of the Prince of Monaco and the Foundation, you probably remember that the IPCC drafted and published in Monaco the special report on the ocean, the cryosphere, in the context of climate change. So that was one of the most significant achievements of the Principality in recent years, to bring together, science evidence and lead then to decisions and action. We are also currently advancing oceanographic research itself, in particular through scientific expeditions conducted by the Explorations of Monaco. And the UNDecade, we believe, offers a unique opportunity to fill this scientific gap and advance research, particularly on marine World Heritage sites. And the UNESCO roadmap brings a strong ambition on this matter. It is indeed crucial to bring together the scientific knowledge and ocean science needed to guide the management of marine sites in a changing ocean. For all these reasons, of course, it was quite natural to establish a partnership between IOC, UNESCO, and the Prince of Monaco Foundation to benefit the decade, which partnership marks both an achievement and a strong promise. Again, as you probably know, Prince Albert is a founding member and a patron of the Alliance for the Decade of Ocean Sciences, and he's constantly engaged in raising awareness of the importance of generating ocean knowledge. His foundation is thus a natural member, and we are proud to extend his commitment through such a partnership. So just to give a little reflection on the role of foundations, why is it important and why am I standing here, except that I'm the host of the week, but we believe that foundations have an important role to play in the process of bridging this gap between science and decision-making processes. Why that? Well, perhaps because we are more agile, more flexible in our structure and in the way we operate. So we can more easily support innovations and solutions, both in terms of technology and financial approaches, keeping in mind, unfortunately, that SDG 14 is still the least funded goal. I just heard this morning on a session that we need $5 billion per year to achieve the 30 by 30 target. However, up to date, only $10 billion in total were invested on SDG 14. So we're very far from reaching it. We therefore need to go faster and to structure new approaches to channel investments on the ocean. And I'll give you an example we're very proud of. Is the Global Fund for Coral Reef, which is blended finance. So we have launched it with Paul Allen Foundation, and it provides traditional philanthropy alongside impact investment. And we believe this new model, which was innovative when it was launched, can be successful by bringing charities, philanthropies that have achieved a lot in the past, but also to channel investors, banks, and states together to join forces and achieve better results. So the final goal of this fund is to raise $500 million on the period of 10 years. And we're getting there, so we're very pleased. So this example shows the strength of foundations, which, because of their positioning, can also bring together the different stakeholders and federate and facilitate the dialogue and help set vital interim targets and solid monitoring. Because we were talking about a lot yesterday, the Blue Initiative, about the commitments. We need more commitments in every aspect of the ocean challenges. However, since we don't have enough interim targets, is it really worth establishing new commitments if we cannot assess the past ones? So it was quite an interesting debate that needs probably more conversation to assess whether it is accurate or not. So we are very pleased to partner with you on the OceanDecade, and as Julian said, we are extremely proud to host next year in June the third dialogue of foundations supporting the decade. We will grow, and we need to grow the circle and the alliance of foundations ready to commit, giving various themes and various backgrounds of their own expertise to the debate and to the table. We need to help strengthen and channel these investments that exist in the world. We need to channel them on real solutions existing that have proved that they not only create jobs, but also generate quite interesting profits and margins. So there is a market. We need to bridge this gap between the need, the potential, and the investment existing. So not only will we organize this third dialogue next year, but we will also host, in partnership with IOC UNESCO tomorrow, the Ocean Innovators Platform, which will be an entire day dedicated to B2B meetings to really put together existing businesses in face of investment funds and philanthropies. So this is the path we are following at the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. We believe that ocean challenges are crucial to face and address the climate change issues. One is definitely linked with the other, and unfortunately we believe that not only 5% of the people over the planet understand this intense and this vital relationship. So there's still a lot to do. Again, foundations being at the crossroads of the private sector, the public sector, and the civil society have a role to play, and we'll be very happy to continue assist you in achieving this great goal. Thank you so much, and have very fruitful meetings.
Thank you very much, Olivier, for those good words, for your leadership as well as you explained in working through this network of philanthropists and for putting forward the actions in investments in ocean science. Next speaker, I have a pleasure to invite Maren Bauer, who is a member of the OceanDecade Informal Working Group on Technology and Innovation for the UN OceanDecade. Maren is an investor and owner of Find Ocean Ventures, a Nordic fund manager that invests in commercially investable ocean ventures at the growth stage. And she has invested into and supported numerous blue economy startups globally. And Maren is going to give us a bit of an overview of the field of ocean technology and innovation in the context of a decade. So over to you, Maren.
Thank you. And thank you, Olivier, for hosting this Monaco Ocean Week. It's great to be here again and meet people in person after a couple of years behind the screen. We started off yesterday with the good discussions at the Monaco Blue Initiative, and I would like to start with quoting His Serene Highness Prince Albert from his opening speech there. He said that whatever way we see our future, the ocean plays a key role. A role made up of tensions and contradictions which are intrinsic to our world and which we need to address. And I think this gives a good backdrop for today's discussion. We've talked a lot about the challenges in the ocean with pollution from landfills, runoffs, overfishing, the negative effects of climate change, to mention some. But in this session, I hope we can also focus on the solutions and spread optimism and inspiration as well, because there are a lot of good things happening. And the ocean, a healthy ocean, will help us solve some of the key challenges we are facing. It can help us feed the growing population, provide solutions to address climate change and biodiversity loss. We need to scale up nature-based marine solutions for this. The ocean can also help us create decent jobs and develop a more equitable social model. And the timing now is good. We see a lot of clever people starting companies in the blue economy. And through my time with Catapult Ocean and Fund, we've looked at thousands of impact-driven ocean startups. And that's inspirational to see. And we also see a growing ecosystem of incubators, accelerators, and funds supporting these people and companies. Capital is also mobilizing. Investors are drawn to this space. We need a lot more capital, but the trend is positive. And we also see an unprecedented number of global initiatives, of which the UN OceanDecade is one very important example. Last fall, we formed the Technology and Innovation Informal Working Group, and I'm honored to work alongside these people from all over the world on really scaling and supporting technologies. Our mission is to ensure that technology and innovation is leveraged, mainstreamed, and accessible, and leads to implementation of impact-driven solutions for sustainable development of the ocean. It's a broad and long mission, and I would like to make it a bit more tangible by highlighting quickly a few examples of solutions that are out there. Aquaculture can play a vital role in feeding a growing planet, but we need to solve many of the sustainability challenges. Developments in AI, camera technology, sensors, alternative protein will support us in developing a more sustainable aquaculture sector. We also need to eat new things from the ocean, at least for some parts of the world. These are new things to eat. Micro and macroalgae can play a vital role, both for human consumption, for feed, and also as alternative materials. Fibers to the textile industry, or alternatives to plastics. And we need to eat new things from the ocean. I think Brian will probably touch upon that afterwards also. One company has developed a sustainable way to harvest from the seabed as an alternative to dredging and trawling, that, by the way, should be made illegal. And these tools can be equipped with sensors, with cameras, to also gather data about the current state of the ocean and help us map it. There are a lot of initiatives now to understand more of the ocean, gather data, and also we can use immersive technologies to communicate the current state of the ocean, both the wonders, but also the challenges, to a broader audience, to engage more people, to start both investing, but also developing solutions in this space. One such issue could be illegal fishing. And fortunately now there are technologies like satellite technologies and also autonomous drones that can be used to monitor marine protected areas and also identify such illegal activities. So things are happening, technology is supporting us, but we still have a lot to do. We need more capital in this space, and we need to continue to strengthen cross-collaboration between science, technology, investors, public and private sector, and also engage a broader audience. So I hope that today's session will leave you inspired, that you will have some deep dives into some more specific areas, and that you will leave this session even more enthusiastic about contributing to this important blue shift. Thank you.
Thank you, Maren. Thank you very much, Maren, for this nice introduction and for linking technology with real-life issues and societal and planetary challenges that the decade is trying to highlight. And I'm sure we're going to explore some of those links in our subsequent panel. Let's go to our subsequent panel, and this is our first panel, which is going to focus on innovation and implementation of decade actions. And let me invite our 4 speakers to join me on the panel. So Jamie, Natalie, Richard, and Mathieu, please take your seat. So we only have 3 mics, so 2 mics. 2 mics, okay, 3 mics. There's a third one that's coming. So, okay, so I'm gonna start with you, Jamie. First of all, I'm gonna introduce you. So Jamie, Michael Phillips is the director of the Nippon Foundation JEPCO Seabed 2030 project, which is a decade-endorsed project as well, a program, I would say. Jamie is a chartered surveyor, hydrographer, and former Royal Navy officer, and he has worked in a range of leadership roles from running his own marine data gathering missions to directing defense, geospatial strategies and plans for the UK. So let's focus on this issue of ocean mapping. First of all, Jamie, can you tell us a little bit more about, about we hear very often that we know more about the moon or even Mars than about the seabed. Why is this?
Julian, thank you for the kind introduction, and Olivier, thank you for making all this happen. Well, quite frankly, it is all down to physics. We do know more about the dry parts of the Earth, we do know more about the Moon, and we do know more about the surface of Mars, because it is easy to mount a camera on a platform, whether it's a satellite, whether it's a space vessel, or whether it's a vessel out an aircraft operating over land, and it's very easy to photograph and to map the dry bits. When it comes to the ocean, light quite simply doesn't penetrate very far. And so for the deeper parts of the ocean, we are very much stuck by the law of physics with using sound. So sonar systems, echo sounder systems, to map the ocean floor. And that's a slow process. They generally have to be hull mounted, and therefore vessels have to ply their trade on the ocean floors conducting that mapping. So to date, we've got to 20.6% of our world ocean mapped, which means we've got 4/5 of the ocean, which covers 3/4 of our planet, that we simply don't know what the shape of the seabed looks like. Yet, we're very happy to operate on the ocean, but without the reference frame, the XYZ, the map on which to base a lot of other ocean science and lots of other ocean activities. So the challenge is getting to that 100% ocean mapped, because all the ocean is important. Why is it important? Because the shape of the seabed affects how ocean currents circulate through our oceans, which in turn affects climate and climate change. The shape of the seabed and the roughness of the seabed affects the strength and paths of tsunamis. So if you're living in marginal areas, then surely you want to know that the model that is being used to predict those tsunamis is based on the best possible map of the seabed. And of course, a lot more: safety of navigation, coastal erosion, detection and protection of marine biodiversity, always based on having a good map of the ocean.
Thanks. Can you tell us a bit where we have good maps, and where are the biggest gaps in ocean seafloor mapping?
Well, I mean, the biggest gap is the 80% yet to map, and I think we have a slide that Alison is going to put up for me. So this is a depiction of where we have data. The Nippon Foundation Seabed 2030 project is an accelerator to the long-term IHO, IOC-led JEPCO program. That is something that was started by Prince Albert I of Monaco back in 1901 to bring together the most authoritative bathymetry depth information for the seabed. And that JEPCO grid persists to this day. It is freely available, it is free to download, and the Seabed 2030 project is the accelerator to get that grid to 100% by the year 2030. And what you see on the screen behind me is areas depicted in blue, which was where we were when we started the Seabed 2030 project back in 2017, where only 6% of the ocean floor was adequately mapped. The orange lines are what we've added between 2017 and 2021, and all those dark areas of ocean are simply where we have got no adequate data. So a huge amount of ocean floor still to map, but it is achievable with effort.
Great, thank you, Jamie. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. But now let me go to Natalie Fox. So Natalie is an early career ocean professional, and with her first paper on the intersection between surfing and ocean literacy published last year. She's a coordinator of another OceanDecade activity, which is Citizens of Surf, which is implementing regeneration surf in 2022. So we've talked about, sometimes when we think about technical innovation, we think about machines and all the robots and so on, but we also need to talk about social innovation and the way we get people to work together and collaborate. Can you tell us about this Citizens of Surf initiative and what's the aim?
Sure. So my experience, my background is as a surfer, so I have a deep love and respect for the ocean, and I've spent a lot of time in surf communities and have found that there is also a variation in how people relate to the ocean and different surf ecosystems, so there's a lot of scope to explore that. And citizen science provides a really great pathway, and again, as a personal experience, as we can see from a slide, Alison is going to pop up there. I did some research aboard Expedition as a citizen scientist looking at microplastics, and it then led me to my research area, this gap of actually how citizens get involved with scientific discovery and exploration and innovation. And so Citizens of Surf is really finding these tools that are specific to surfers. So we're working in 3 different areas: climate change, microplastics, and biodiversity loss. And our first project was launched last month, which is Regeneration Surf, and this is focusing more on kelp reforestation. So we're connecting surfers to how they can actually seed this green gravel, so it's small stones that have plants attached to it, and then they can be the ones to deploy the gravel and start building and rebuilding, restoring kelp reforestation and kelp forests in their own backyard, and that's in Portugal. And we've partnered with the World Surf League as well to really help reach that global audience within the surfing community.
Thanks. So what about local communities? What kind of approaches are you using to actually engage local communities in ocean science? And what have been the benefits from your point of view?
Sure. So I think one of the key things about citizen science is this relationship that people have with the ocean that develops. You develop ocean literacy. So within our project Regeneration Surf, we're also offering ocean literacy workshops through freediving, so that people can then go and local schools actually can then go and visit the kelp forests that are in the local area. And also community engagement and looking at things from a more systemic view, like you mentioned, co-design with the local communities. So it's innovation, like we have these different tools with SmartFin, which is using a fin on your surfboard, and it uploads straight to a database to link to researchers. And we also have the manta trawls, which can be developed. And then we've got the green gravel, but it's really about involving people and finding the ways in which they can relate. And I've got one more slide, actually, when we had the commentators from WSL come and join us in the lab. So a great way is through media and communication, so that we're speaking to people in a language that they understand and they can feel involved in and engage more in.
Very good, thank you. So translating science in common term that people can understand. Thank you. We'll come back to that again. Let me remind you that we'll have time for Q&As at the end of this first panel, so keep this in mind in case you see or you want to ask something. Our next speaker is Richard Billerby. So Richard is a marine biogeochemist studying ocean chemistry, marine ecosystems and climate change and socio-ecological systems through observations and modeling. He is a chief scientist for climate and oceans at the Norwegian Institute for Water Research. He is the director of the SCLEC NIVA, Center for Marine and Coastal Climate Research, East China, Normal University, Shanghai, China, and is an adjunct professor of the Faculty of Applied Science in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. That's a lot of jobs, Richard, you have there. You must be very busy. Okay, so Richard is involved in the work of ocean acidification, and in particularly one of a program which is called WARS. He will explain to us what that means, which is in fact an endorsed decade program. So Richard, can you give us a feel for the high-level objectives and the activities of this program to start with?
Okay, well, thank you for this invitation, and thank you, Olivier. The reason I'm here is to hide from all my jobs. So, the OARS program, Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, is built on the hard work and the excellent development that has gone into the GO-ON program, the Global Ocean Acidification Network, where experts have gathered together data sets, improved technologies, developed protocols for measurement and reporting. So on that very scientific baseline, we've bore the OARS program, which is more to communicate and to develop more targeted use of that excellent data set. So it's actually, the official objective is to provide society with the observational and scientific evidence needed to identify, mitigate, and adapt to ocean acidification. And very similar to what Natalie says, the biggest step that we encounter is communication. The concept of pH, logarithm scales, strange terminologies, it creates an immediate barrier. Therefore, the first activity is to provide a platform for discussion between the managers, between industry, between local communities and scientists, to translate exactly across the different disciplinary boundaries, but also on the background that in Norway, 70% of managers get their information from Google. We have a very long way to go. So this first activity is so important that we need to get to the grassroots and really communicate what we can provide, but more importantly, what they actually need. And through that, the second activity is to co-design observing strategies to increase capacity. And that's going out and talking to industrial, to innovators, to new approaches. For example, scallop investments in northern Norway or in the high Arctic are very vulnerable to acidification. Therefore, when we're talking about the risk, when we were discussing the risk work in the meeting yesterday, this is such an important part for many of the critical ecosystem-based investments. The next one is to support evidence-based public and political awareness and action. I think, I'm not going to go into the technical stages in the middle of the activities, but really, to see action, it has to be understood at every level. And again, I've sort of gone full circle, but I do think that this is the most important one, that we won't see any sustainable investments over the next 30 to 50 years on many of the blue systems, ecosystems that we're doing, if you do not take into account ocean acidification.
Thank you. So I understand that you work quite closely with the aquaculture and finance industries in particular. Can you tell us a bit more about what kind of innovative approaches you've been using to engage these stakeholders
And can you give some examples of joint initiatives that you've been developing?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest step change that we've done is that we have completely forgotten our traditional way of monitoring the ocean. We do not go and measure every half a nautical mile or something. So I'm sampling from trawlers with trawlermen who we have on board the aquaculture specialists. This was up in Lofoten, and they said, take a sample there, take a sample there. And through that communication of what we're doing and how we're doing it and what it means, and then taking the results and discussing it with the local communities, just having open house. You have no idea who's going to come to the meeting, and you ask them, what do you know? How has your system changed? Where is it changing? How fast is it changing? And that guides the research that we did in this project. And because of that understanding and that trust, we were able to sample within legal distances from aquaculture units. We have a certain distance we're not allowed to go, a few hundred meters. We could actually put sediment traps underneath, directly underneath the aquaculture, and measure the acidification, or at least the reduction in pH. And the main point of this is that within the 3 years of the project, the local knowledge and, say, pressure, encouragement, meant that the local council changed the grey water supply to the fjord, which was causing phosphate input and stratification, and that was causing acidification. We had in that fjord, we had a high CO2 world we expect to see at the end of the century already there, and that changed laws within 3 years. And that would not have happened if we'd have just gone to the managers. You need to build up from below to get that voice of support and that voice of understanding and that fear of chemistry and strange symbols.
Thank you. So bottom-up approach is essential in the process. You mentioned also ocean observation, so that's a nice transition to our next speaker, which is Mathieu Belbeoc, a colleague of mine, who is the manager of a joint IOC WMO center, OceanOps, based in Brest. He was the technical coordinator of the International Argo program since 2001 and the leader of the JCOM Observations Program Support Center. And Mathieu is going to say a few words about the Odyssey project, which was launched last month at the Brest Summit. So Mathieu, tell us, what is this all about?
Hello? Okay, good. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Julian, Alison, and thanks for Monaco as well for hosting us. You mentioned in the beginning this cruise going on in the Indian Ocean. You don't know how important it is, actually, because we have the Argo meeting running right now trying to identify the gap in the vast ocean. And this cruise will make a huge contribution there because we have a big pressure because of the COVID and difficulties of deploying instruments last year there. This contribution is even more important and will also trigger, I think, a lot of international cooperation between South Africa, Seychelles, Mauritius. So the Odyssey project is a very simple but very ambitious idea. The ocean observing system, we might see a map just after of the ocean observing system or before. No, we don't have it. Okay. So the global ocean observing system is implemented by governments. It's about 10,000 observing platforms that are taking the pulse of the ocean or atmosphere above it or subsurface. 2,000 ships, 4,000 profiling robots, surface drifters. These are very small instruments in a vast ocean. And government scientists are maintaining those networks on a yearly basis, on an ongoing work to replace the instruments. All that are feeding 3 big applications: the operational application, so like a weather forecast or extreme weather event forecasting, the climate science, and the ocean health monitoring. So these are the first brick of a whole value chain. And we have been, so we're supporting the scientists doing that work every day. But some years ago, we piloted a number of partnership with civil society, with sailors in particular, individual explorers, Some of them are on the seafront, they're on the walls, they have their photo. But selling races like the Vendée Globe. So we partner with those civil society members or private entities to get them to contribute to the system, to drop instruments in the ocean, especially in the Southern Ocean. You don't have many ships going there. So every single ship going below 30 south is like gold for us. And they can also take weather observation. All of us, we are using weather forecast every single day, but you know, there's only a few sensors around to enable that in the ocean. So with the UNDecade brilliant idea and huge opportunity to build upon that, we'd like to coordinate the contribution of civil society and private in the global ocean observing system. So we believe there's an appetite on that side first. There's a willing of civil society and private to do something useful. It's also a benefit for us because the ocean is so vast. We cannot only count on scientists, governments to do the work. We need much more partnerships. And so we launched that program in Brest recently with the ambition from the coast, surfers, divers, to the high seas with a big merchant ship of big company like Maersk and others, to have, going through fishing vessels, sailing vessels, all the mariners. Actually, mariners are the first observer of the planet. 150 years ago, they were starting to share weather observation. All that has modernized through technology, satellite, etc. And we think there's a huge potential to unlock. And today we have 10,000 units sending data. We believe at the end of the decade we may have 10 times more. Depends how we can build those partnerships, but we'd like to get them on board into a nice project where they can get visibility, build also on the existing bricks. There's a lot of challenge with data availability, a lot of synergies. Bathymetry is part of the thing because there are ships, they dropping instrument, making measurement, but they could do bathymetry. Big ships, small ships. So we'd like to build that, but to build it with the civil society. So we started this program, we're now trying to get resources to drive it, but in the end we want this project to be driven, implemented by civil society. Scientists are doing their share. This program can bring a few more % in the system, but this is not research, it's operational. So if we think one of the super yachts behind me, they're going at sea in the Med Sea, if they share weather observation in real time, their next weather forecast will take benefit from that. So there's an immediate benefit, but there's a long-run benefit for climate, for biodiversity, for all of that. So we believe the decade will give us a dynamic, and thanks again for all the effort the IOC is putting into that program, and we'll see in 10 years from now where we are.
Thanks, Mathieu. So explaining the benefits, that's important. But let's go back to maybe for 1 minute to the technology aspect of this. Because clearly, I mean, technology plays a central part in ocean observation. But what are some of the recent technological development that you are seeing and you think could be a real game changers in in terms of the way we understand our ocean? So
yes, there was a kind of revolution in the last couple of decades because of the satellite telemetry, because of the sensors, and the system can be more and more multidisciplinary. It's not only measuring temperature, but you can measure plenty of other things around those vectors. But in the end, we need to find funding for those thermometers, for those instruments. That's where the story starts. And we think that investing there for some big companies or other partners is pretty cheap. Those sensors doesn't cost much. But in the end, their value is very important. Again, the ocean is so vast. There's observation we cannot make from space. You don't see air pressure from space. So you have to get there and to get an observation. So we need, and the ocean is not like roads. Not everybody is going into the ocean. That's why we need mariner support. And we need sensors in the end and observing packages.
Thanks. So actually, similar question to you, Jamie. What kind of innovation and technology you are seeing in the field of ocean mapping that could also help us to reach our goal by 2030?
One of the biggest game changers in the ocean space is the operationalization of remote technology, handling big data, the way we have gone from what were pretty much engineering drawings in 2014, 2015, to actually seeing being operated by industry uncrewed and lightly crewed vessels, which means you have got greener, lower carbon footprint vessels operating at great range from headquarters. You're taking the dangerous or reducing or mitigating the dangerous risks of people at sea in inhospitable climates. Those vessels can take greater payloads at lower cost, and we've seen that particularly close to the heart of Seabed 2030. The Shell Ocean Discovery X Prize was won by a team from the Nippon Foundation JEBCO alumni, and the vessel that was used was Seakit. Seakit was able to deploy other sensors, the first time that had ever been done at sea. Seakit is now being used by industry, and that is a huge game changer, lower costs and much greater range. And we saw back in 2020 the use of an uncrewed vessel that was operating mid-Atlantic, that was being controlled from an operations room on the east coast of the United Kingdom by satellite. And in this particular case, the sensors were being operated by scientists around the world. And Seabed 2030 was very privileged to be allowed to use the sonar system on board. And we had 12 individuals in 8 different countries across the globe using Microsoft Teams to gather depth information. That is a huge game changer.
Great, thanks. Natalie, you represent also the early career ocean professional groups here, and I think this is a very important and instrumental group that from the start of the development of a decade has been very vocal about the need of a younger generation. So, can you say maybe a few words about the early career ocean professional program and really, how it could play actually this role in terms of linking science, innovation, and technology?
Absolutely. So an ECOP is someone who is self-prescribed in the early stages of their career. I'm assuming you guys have passed that stage, are quite experienced. I'm still quite new to it. And there's many challenges to get past the ECOP stage and to become established. And so the ECOP program was really born out of this need to have more diverse representation within ocean science and within the OceanDecade. And it's bridging this gap and sharing knowledge and communication between established, experienced professionals and people who are just early stages in their career. And it's doing that through several pathways. We are really focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's helped with the different hubs across the world. We've also got ocean literacy and training and mentorship, which is so important when you're in this early stage and you're not really quite sure how things operate, and networking is such a huge opportunity. So within the program, we're sharing networking opportunities and events. For instance, me being here I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be here and represent people who are just starting out in their careers, but they're also going to be the ones that are inheriting all the decision making that is being made now. So they're really integral to building the future for the shared ocean. So we also have several endorsed programs as well. So we're really trying to build this connection within the OceanDecade and making sure that we're a big part of it and helping encourage as well citizens and the public to be involved, because we're the ones that are working in schools and universities and have that access to the general public as well to share the messages about the decade of ocean science and that everyone can be involved.
Very good. For and driven by the ECOPs, that's what we need. Okay, let's, I suggest we open the floor, see if there are any questions from my audience, and then we will come back to our speakers. So, anybody would like to ask a question to our panel or on internet? Is there anything coming up? Oh, yep. over to you. Alison, do you have a question? Oh, we have a question. Here we go. If you can just introduce yourself and then raise your question. Thank you.
On? Where's loud? Ross Brooks, Investment Director at Catapult Ocean, coming here from Norway also. Yeah, we're an impact investor investing in ocean technology. We're trying really hard to measure impact. And of course, to measure ocean impact, we need to understand the ocean, understand the feedback loops and the complexity of all the systems within it. And of course, all the different areas of mapping are crucial that you've just talked about. How do you think about, this is a really horrible question for you, I'm sorry in advance, but I'll make it challenging. How do you think about ranking the importance of different types of data? And to give you an example, if we are, for example, focused on carbon sequestration to combat acidification, if, for example, excess nutrients and dead zones were to create a much more meaningful problem on a systemic level, how can you explain that to people? And then how can we as investors channel our capital to the right location? Yeah, I don't know how to take that one.
Richard, I heard the word nutrients, impact on ecosystems. It might be you.
I only know. The good thing about ocean acidification research is you have to understand nutrient cycles and physical oceanography as well. So there is no, I mean, it's horses for courses. It really does depend on if you're looking at a cold water coral reef, or you're looking at a kelp bed, or you're looking at sustainable aquaculture or sustainable fisheries. Then that's the whole point of the first activity in oars, is we go and tailor-make a scientific approach, and we identify the key factors. But I mean, taking kelp or kelp barrens as an example, and carbon, that's obviously a big, it's going to be talked about in the next session, and it's something that we collaborate with Brian on and other reforesters, is that I think the main question is, for carbon sequestration, is to understand the ecological coupling and then the sequestration potential and the sedimentation or the offshore. So you're certainly within the short term. So an investment, I am going to invest here for 5 years. But if you want to invest and build the infrastructure around that investment with local communities for distribution, etc., then you have to start bringing in the climate change people, because at some point your harvesting strategies or your growth rates will change in response to warming or acidification. And there is one more activity in oars which I didn't have time to talk, but it's very relevant, is that for the first time, I think in an OceanDecade program, we are going to be discussing with terrestrial stakeholders because of that very close land-ocean interaction. And that's so relevant for the success of any kelp restoration. If you do not have the hydrological flow, if you do not have the nutrient use on land, etc. So the short answer is there is no one answer to your question. It varies much on each fjord, each bay, each industrial activity, each MBS. So, no, for each one there will be a minimum which will be successful. It's whatever we agree with the investors and the risk analysis, what the percentage of success is.
Thank you, Richard. So indeed, that dialogue with respective sectors is so critical to really understand the needs in terms of data and knowledge products. We have a question from far beyond there, and I think this is Harriet. Yes, over to you.
Hi. Thank you. Hi everyone, Harriet Harden-Davies. Thank you very much to the panelists, and good to see some of you again. I have a question about how do you see the future through the decade to empower emerging ocean leaders? Particularly the great intervention from Natalie about the ECOP program, but we see so many early career people who can't access the funding they need to get their ideas off the ground, who don't know how to actually start talking to people like folks in this room. And how do you think we can have innovation in leadership to bring new voices to the table, to have the capacity and tools that they need so that they can really drive forward these innovations and contribute to the decade as they could?
So it's a question probably for you, Natalie, but no, I don't think just for you actually, because it's you know, the ones who are managing those programs that also need to take on that issue full scale. But you can start.
I think yeah, Mathieu mentioned before, it's as well about interdisciplinary, trans and multidisciplinary, this bridging the gap between the different sectors. I'm lucky because I've had some experience with communication, so that brings me to be able to communicate, but I think as well developing training and mentorship, and the incubator programs we're going to be hearing from Catapult Ocean in the next panel will be a really great one to think about this, an actual program where people can apply to. I think for me, actually just reaching out to the Decade of Ocean Science and offering and finding out where I can get involved and where there is accessibility and availability, but now is the next point where we need to reach a further wider audience. So in funding, I don't really know the answer to that. I think it might have to go to one of you guys to see where those opportunities might lie. I'm still figuring, if anyone else has any suggestions about that.
Leadership for ECOPS. Jamie.
Just a few words. And one of the strategic leaders of the Seabed 2030 project is the Nippon Foundation. Nippon Foundation are a great philanthropic organization with a focus, amongst other things, on ocean science, and they run a number of programs really geared at early career ocean professionals. The one that's closely affiliated but not part of Seabed 2030 is an ocean mapping program that is a course that is run for students from all across the globe. That has been running for probably about 18 years now, 100 fellows. Those individuals don't necessarily go back to deep ocean mapping. They go back to a variety of roles, some in the senior government chains of small island developing states, others chief executives of startup companies, and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities there to, certainly from the Nippon Foundation's perspective, to encourage that social engagement and that innovation. And I know certainly from my work with the Nippon Foundation in the 2.5 years I've been with Seabed 2030, they are always open to approaches for innovative ideas that they might consider funding. So there are opportunities there.
Richard, would you like to add something?
Ed, I'll try and be quick. We do have a mentoring program under the ocean acidification, under OARS, but more importantly, I think, is that GOON, the Global Ocean Observing Network, has regional hubs. And if you look at OA Africa and the LAOCA, the Latin American, and also the small island states, they are all led by very young, early stage. I think it's more in the developed world that you get the corks, like the old farts like me in the way. But certainly the beauty of ocean acidification research is that it's new. It's developing so fast that it requires new thinkers and youth. So it's a good place to be. Come and join us.
Great, thank you. We probably have time for one or two more questions. Anybody in the audience or anybody online would like to raise a question? I see not.
We have an online question,
okay,
which is more for Mathieu, which is about how do you convince industry to share data? If they're saying that data is commercially sensitive, it has a dollar value attached to it, how can you convince them to share that data through the Odyssey project? It was from an anonymous requester. I don't have a name for that one.
Well, thanks for this very good question. We are working on it. I think the argument, there are several arguments. One argument is for their own benefit. As I said, if you share some critical data, the societal application using those data will build better product for you. And for, again, taking the shipping industry there, if there are more weather observation, more ocean observations, they can optimize their fuel consumption, they can have a safer route, etc. All that is totally obvious. But I think there's another one to take into account, is that they need to appear as actor of the system. And that's one of the aims of Odyssey. They are implementer. We don't want them to fund or to be, just putting money there. We want them to be actor of the system for two reasons. For one operational reason, because we need those observations and those systems operating and sending data. So they need to appear on the map of the goose, as the member states of IOC are appearing in contributing to those programs. Private sphere, philanthropic, or whoever partner of civil society would appear as a contributor of the system. So visibility. And also the third one is a kind of a side benefit I've noted in the past. When you have a scientist that try to explain to the large public how important are those programs for climate. I mean, the large public doesn't hear the message. But when you have someone, a sailor, a big private company that tell you, we're doing that because it's important to contribute, then you don't have the same language. And so we have figured out that those new partners are operationally very interesting, but also in terms of communication, they have become ambassador of the system with a better, I would say, direct communication. And in all this, I mean, those scientists deploy instruments for decades. They never go to the TV, to the newspaper. But whenever one of those famous sailors does it, there's TV all around, and they can tell the whole story. And there's human story behind. So yes, visibility, operationality, communication.
Thanks. Okay, we need to wrap up now, but I'm just going to ask you very quickly, what will success look like by the end of a decade for each of you? Oh, we can start with you, Natalie. Very quickly, 20 seconds.
Reaching the decade outcomes, especially a resilient, healthy, inspiring and engaging ocean for everyone.
Very good.
From a Seabed 2030 perspective, as a flagship program of the UNDecade, 100% mapping by the year 2030 to provide that baseline for all the other science and all the policy decision making that needs to be made using that ocean information.
Very good.
I mean, I think it's obvious I would echo what Natalie said, but I also want an engaged, informed society who can guarantee that this will continue and it's not just a short-term fad.
Very good. Mathieu?
Well, I think for me, I just said it before, I'd like to see those surfers providing data, the big merchant ship providing bathymetry data, or providing oxygen data, the civil society bringing observation into the system, appearing on the map, and massively.
Thank you very much. Let me have a round of applause for our great panel. Thank you very much for those great initiatives, the Decade in Action. So I'll invite you to take a seat, and we are going to invite our next panel, and I would like to see Jonas, Angela, who's online, and Brian to join us. But in the meantime, during that transition, we are going to show you a very short video, which is about the Blue Climate Initiative, which is an endorsed Decade contribution, and you will find out about the recent prize that has been organized and some of the actors of that prize and winners of that prize. And I just want to acknowledge our friends, Stan Rowland and Vicky Schoenfeld, who are with us in the room and who are the leaders of this initiative.
Have you ever wondered how the ocean can help solve the climate crisis? The ocean holds unique and powerful solutions, and innovators are now unleashing them. The winners of Blue Climate Initiative's $1 million Ocean Innovation Prize are demonstrating the amazing powers of the ocean in the fight against climate change.
Symbrosia is creating an all-natural seaweed snack for cows that reduces their enteric methane emissions by over 90%. We completed the world's first commercial trial on an organic sheep farm and saw 75% reduction in methane. Let's use this incredible ocean resource to solve livestock methane emissions once and for all.
Biopack transforms seaweed into bioplastic without using any hazardous chemicals. We decrease plastic waste pollution and CO2 emission. We improve the livelihood of seaweed farmers by securing seaweed demand continuously. We are the last generation who still have a chance in a very short time to save our Earth.
SMO Solar process bioenergy with carbon capture and utilization technology turns sargassum into energy and valuable carbon capturing products. Sargassum is one of the species with the fastest growth, absorbing 7 times more CO2 than the Amazonian forest.
These 3 seaweed-based solutions rose to the top from among 236 applicants and 21 semi-finalists of the Ocean Innovation Prize. Honorable mentions include EcoWave Power and Core Power Ocean, which convert ocean waves into clean electricity, onshore and offshore. The Blue Climate Initiative, along with its partners, the UN OceanDecade and Sustainable Ocean Alliance, are thrilled to support these incredible innovations. We invite you to join us in scaling these solutions and reinventing our relationship to the ocean. To find out more, go to blueclimateinitiative.org and turn knowledge into solutions for people, ocean, and planet.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great timing, as always. Okay, so we have our next panel, and this panel is really focusing more on the enabling condition and really looking at, how can we really nurture and foster the links between technology and innovation and ocean science. So we have 3 speakers. I'm going to start by introducing our first one. This is Jonas Scatum Schweigarden. I hope I'm doing well here. Jonas is the CEO and the CIO, which means Chief Investment Officer. That's what I learned today. For Catapult Ocean, which is a venture capital fund. He has 15 years of experience from global asset management and investments. So can you, Jonas, start by telling us a bit more about Catapult, its work to support ocean innovation and technology? And then can you say maybe how you have joined forces with partners to create the 1000 Ocean Startup Coalition, which is also a partner of the OceanDecade?
Great. Thanks, Julian, and thanks for that introduction. Thanks for the invitation by the foundation, and thanks for being here. I think I'll start at the 1000 Ocean Startups first. It's a global coalition that's pledged to invest in 1000 ocean startups that's working on an impact notion to affect the oceans and invest in 1000 ocean startups within the OceanDecade. So it's a coalition of 20 members, incubators, accelerators, venture capital fund programs and competitions to back innovators, because we need innovation to happen. I think that's one of the pains in the full equation we're looking to solve during the OceanDecade. So members across the world, from Cape Town to Canada, established last year. As for Catapult Ocean, I think one of our investment directors, Ross, also mentioned it. We're a global investor in the ocean impact space. In fact, we're the most active investor in the ocean impact venture space. So what we do is we activate fund investors, family offices, foundations, pension funds, corporate ventures, and the like, that invest into our funds, and we will invest those accordingly into ocean innovators. And we slice and dice the oceans into blue foods, blue energy, transportation, and of course ocean health and understanding the ocean, including ocean data. So we're investing quite broadly. We're investing globally because we believe that the talent is global. And we're chasing those climate and social solutions within the ocean economy.
Great. So maybe to to go a bit deeper, what are the characteristics of the ideal ocean innovation and technology project? I guess in a sense, it's really what are you looking for as you make investment decisions in those projects?
Great. I think maybe I'll just give some examples of what we actually do and what we actually back and invest into. For instance, we're investing heavily into the seaweed value chain. We're investing into seaweed harvesting, from offshore seaweed cultivation systems to biorefinery of seaweeds to monitoring and scaling seaweed production. We're investing into kelp chips, as mentioned here. We're investing into using algae to dye clothes, and companies that do have innovative solutions. But we're always looking for the financial return and the impactful return, the triple bottom lines. And we're very conscious that we're running financial funds and we need to see those returns for our fund investors. But we're having our checklist and criteria, teams being a large part of our assessment and due diligence as we invest with people. Those will bring the solutions for the future.
Great, thank you. So I'll come back to you in a minute. But let's see if our next speaker, which is Angela Benarek, is with us online. Hopefully we can connect her. Hello, good morning, Angela. Welcome to Monaco.
I'm disappointed not to be there in person.
I bet. Anyway, thank you very much for being with us and for joining this panel. So let me introduce you. You direct the Evidence Project at the Pew Charitable Trust, leading efforts to build collaborations amongst funders, researchers, decision makers, and other stakeholders to identify and promote promising practices in engaged, actionable research and evidence-informed decision-making in many sectors. So we're going to talk about the role of co-design as an essential driver of innovation in ocean science. So can you tell us a bit more about this evidence project that you are leading, and what's the vision and the strategy behind it?
Thank you. And it's great to be back amongst ocean folks. Spent a better part of a decade working on oceans issues here at Pew, and now I work much more cross-sectorally, so it's great to be back in some of my roots. So the Evidence Project was really created to promote a future where science and the rest of society are in regular and meaningful dialogue to meet the big challenges of our time, whether that's ocean conservation or some other big, wicked societal problem. And what we think needs to happen is that government, civil society, and communities can work with researchers to design research that can more easily meet their needs. And in other words, co-designing research, which I've heard is already been discussed this morning. But what we realize is that's not easy. It's a fairly new approach to research, and there are lots of barriers, infrastructure within organizations, incentives for academics. So it's not an easy thing to just take up and start doing. And so the Evidence Project really focuses on making it easier to engage in co-design by strengthening the practice and sharing practice and understanding what works so that we can generate more useful, actionable, inclusive evidence. And what we want to do, because we realized pretty early on that it wasn't enough to just improve practice and share practice, that there were quite a few big barriers to undertaking these approaches, that we really needed to find ways to build the infrastructure and tackle some of these systemic barriers to make it easier to make more of it, to do more of it, to scale it. And so the way that we've approached that is in large part by building collaborations. So one of the collaborations that we have created, the Transforming Evidence Network, is designed to bring together scholars who've studied how this works and what it means for a policy to take on research and use it to make decisions, those who've studied co-design, and those who practice it. Bring them all together so that they can learn from each other and we can really push forward. And what we've learned is those practices are actually pretty transferable across sectors, which is one of the reasons we've been able to move forward more quickly than we expected, because we can take lots of practices from lots of different sectors. The second big thread of our work is focusing on tackling those systemic barriers. And we realized pretty early on that one of the ways that we could do this is to build a network of funders who are already interested in this, and who were interested in learning from each other. So again, helping grant makers and funders take on promising practices that will allow them to support this kind of work, but also we created this network so that funders could work together to align efforts where it made sense, and to start tackling some of these barriers like academic incentives or building a workforce who could engage in this kind of co-design work. And so this funders network is a big part of our work. It's called the Transforming Evidence Funders Network. And it's a community of funders from all over the world, and many different disciplines and policy sectors that are learning together and aligning efforts. We have public funders, we have private funders, we have individual donors. It doesn't matter what you do. It's if you're interested in how we can make more of co-design and really work together as funders. We have focused, as I mentioned, on the grant practice. So we're as a group, we've designed a short course. It's going to happen later this spring to help bring funders along and give them the tools that they need to fund this. And then we're aligned around several working groups that are tackling the big systemic barriers.
Great, thank you. So, as I'm sure you know, one of the motto of the OceanDecade is co-design ocean science. So, but what about the science of co-design? Is there any lessons we can draw from other sectors who are also engaged in co-design and could be applied very easily to the ocean dimensions?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, I learned that there's a lot to learn from other sectors. So the ways in which we go about co-design are pretty similar across sectors, whether you work in education, environment and ocean, international development, public health, medical research. It's all about how do you co-design with a set of stakeholders who want to work together? How do you make it mutually beneficial? How do you make sure that the approach is pluralistic, so that it's incorporating various kinds of knowledge and different ways of knowing, ensuring that it's really focused on a specific issue? How do we do that? Well, we can learn from other sectors how to do that, but we can also learn about what it means to do this well. And this is a big part, because we're not going to get the social outcomes we want if we don't do this well. If we're not creating more useful, actionable research, we're not going to get the things that we want in the world. We're not going to get the world to look the way that we hope it does. So what we do is we can learn from what it looks like for research to be useful in the world. What does that look like? It doesn't just mean policy change. There are other kinds of measures that we can learn from the science. And more importantly, I think we can also learn about how to do this well in terms of taking a diversity, equity, inclusion lens. So it's not as simple as just bringing a bunch of people together and co-designing research. There are power dynamics at play. There are questions of whether you've brought a sufficient diversity of stakeholders and perspectives together. All of those things play into whether co-design works well, and we can learn from the scholarship behind it about how to do that.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll come back to you in a few minutes. Let me now introduce Brian Tsuyoshi Takeda, who's the CEO and founder of Ergonomics. So Brian is the CEO and founder of Ergonomics, a restorative aquaculture venture that aims to turn an environmental challenge into a commercial, ecological, and social opportunity. So I guess my first question: can you tell us more about Ergonomics and what are the problems you are trying to solve?
Great, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk a little bit about an issue that is very close to our heart, and that is the kelp forests. Alison, are we able to? Perfect. Kelp forests, I'll get the next one. Yeah. Kelp forests are one of the most important ecosystems that we have on our planet. However, due to a combination of overfishing, climate change, and pollution, we have allowed the humble sea urchins to essentially take over entire ocean floors and turn them from a biodiverse ecosystem and collapsing it into essentially a lifeless desert-like barren. And if we don't intervene, that desert condition that you see here on the left can persist for decades or centuries if we don't do anything. So what we do at Ergonomics is we specifically target those ecologically destructive urchins, and we put them into our land-based aquaculture systems where we feed them and we convert them from an ecological pest that keeps that desert state, and we convert it into one of the world's most premium seafood products, or uni, in a matter of 6 to 12 weeks. So maybe we can just go back to that slide. Yeah. So empty urchins that have occupied an ocean floor that destroyed everything, they look like that. There's no value. Fishers don't catch them. Predatory species don't eat them because it's not worth the effort. But with using our aquaculture technology, we can convert them into plump sea urchin roe that sells for over 500 to 600 euros per kilogram. If I can just go to the next slide. And so by removing those urchins from the ocean floor, we contribute to kelp forest restoration. And kelp forests, depending on where we are in the world, can grow back as fast as 3 months, like in California, or in the Nordics, where the sun disappears for about 6 months of the year, it takes about 6 to 7 months. But we can get the kelp forest to come back. So our concept is about taking commercial efforts to restore marine ecosystems.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to this issue of innovation in technology. And can you describe how, what role science has been playing in developing this, your approach? I mean, how do you create this integration between the science, the knowledge, and the solutions?
Of course. So the science is driving literally everything in the value creation of what we do. Whether it's the feed that takes those empty urchins and turns them into a premium seafood product that even the Japanese are willing to pay top dollar for, whether it's the aquaculture systems that have been developed over the last 30 years in the Nordics in figuring out how to create a marine environment on land, and perhaps most importantly, the marine ecosystem research, so making sure that we remove the right urchins from the ocean floor so that we contribute to kelp restoration. All of that is driven by science. A lot of that is publicly funded science, some of it is privately funded science, but at the end of the day, it is the scientific drive that allows us to create the value, create the returns, but also create the desired ecological impact.
So let me ask you another question, which I think is a bit tougher to answer probably, but how do you see the balance between the shorter term kind of commercial imperatives you have as running a company, and the more kind of a longer term timeline, which is associated with ocean conservation and restoration, where we know it takes time for ecosystem to recover?
Right. That's a very valid point. I think the way to tackle that is to say yes to both. Our business model is hardwired, where the more we pursue profits, the better the environment becomes, because we are only targeting those empty, ecologically destructive urchins. The great thing about this is that you can see the ecological restoration timeline is 3 to 6 months. That is actually faster than the expectations of returns from investors. So, what does that mean? That means that we can match the ecological restoration timelines with investors' expectations and essentially satisfy both by pursuing the same effort. But that can only be done when the science is clear. So in places like Norway, where they have a $1.2 trillion oil fund that can do a lot of research in marine ecosystems, we have the most evidence there. And there's actually a pretty clear line of sight as to how industry and blue carbon credits could potentially pay for full marine ecosystem restoration. I won't go down into the details of that, but my point is, those countries that have invested in research have the shortest path to be able to sustainably restore marine ecosystems while also building on industry.
Great, thank you very much. So let me go back to Jonas. How do you convince your investors that the ocean is actually a good place to put their resources? What is the business case that you are using, and what kind of challenges do you encounter in these kind of discussions?
No, I think our investors are seeking financial returns, but they are very conscious that they would like to chase those impactful returns as well. So when we're meeting our investors, they also believe that there will be an immense opportunity investing into impactful solutions for the next decade to come. And as mentioned earlier, the ocean's been very, very under-invested. So go where it's less crowded. It's a lot of opportunities. If you believe that the blue foods will play a large part in the economies going forward, if you believe that we need to have decarbonization of the transportation and shipping vessels going forward. If you believe that we have a lot of climate opportunities investing into the ocean economies, that's a large opportunity set for investors. And as we see more and more technologies are evolving and more and more hardware is put into the waters, the tech risk going down. And if you also see other funders and government funding and alike blended finance come into play, the financial risk is coming down. And lastly, if you do see corporates and adopters of these technologies, if they're interested in innovations, which we see, that commercialization risk is also going down. So I think the stars are aligned. We're just on the verge of seeing the breakthrough of more ocean investments, but we need to do our job as funds and platforms and fundable opportunities for those investors. It's merely up to us as well as fund and products, so to speak, investment products.
Thanks. So let's look at maybe the need of least developing nations, because this is also, the majority of countries, of coastal countries around the world. Can you say maybe a few words how your organization, Catapult and the coalition, can also support technical innovation led by, but also for the benefit of some of those countries?
A large part of our uniqueness at Catapult is that we got our accelerator program, where we have our platform engaging with the innovators, trying to help them. That's what the end game is. If they win, we win. So we need to do all of our efforts trying to help them to be accelerated. And we have a lot of mentors and partners connected to our program and trying to make increase the chances of them to make it. We're an investor from Norway, and we're having a global program and trying to source globally. We also acknowledge that we need to be present and on the ground in some regions. So that's why we also this year established in Rwanda, Kigali, and looking to do more activities in the region and on the continent, trying to grow the ecosystem and to be there. Also providing more tools for pre-acceleration and help and skill sets for even earlier ventures to come into play into our mothership accelerator.
Julian, can I? Sure. I see you're twitching, Brian, so go for it.
I think that's a very relevant point. So for us at Ergonomics, we are a for-profit company, and we will pursue financially attractive investments, and these typically tend to be in the developed countries. That's why our commercial focus is in Japan, Canada, the United States, Norway, Australia, New Zealand. But we recognize that our technology that we have developed can do far greater good than just within the hands of private commercial investors. So we also have launched what we call the Ergonomics Impact Program, which essentially means that if a nonprofit is willing to try to leverage our technology to restore kelp ecosystems in developing countries that doesn't make economic sense for us to do, we are prepared to license our entire technology suite, supply chain, IP, everything, so that it could be done in developing countries that may not make sense for our funders to do, but maybe there are other people that can do it. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the commercial financial investors will pursue certain opportunities. I think with the same tech, we can do other opportunities with other types of funding in other regions.
Right, thank you. And I guess that also implies capacity development along the line, right? Let me go to Angela. Angela, can you, a bit of a similar question, but how do we convince people to invest resources, be that time or money, in co-design? We live in a fast world. People want to see, impacts quickly. And of course, co-design takes time and takes resources and efforts. So what's the business case, for investing in co-design?
You're right. Co-design does take time, and it does take resources. It takes staff time. It takes capacity strengthening to allow everyone to work together well. So there's no doubt that it takes resources. But what we've found is that by being immersed in a particular context where there are real problems that that researchers can tackle and really refine their research agendas and problem solving in direct engagement with those on the ground who understand those problems and want solutions, that we're finding that does lead to innovation. It's not just about, you know, curiosity driven research is the only basic research is the only stuff that leads to innovation. When you're immersed on the ground, there's quite a big potential for it. So it's one of the cases we make is that we're really, you know, this could be a much more and can be a much more efficient and effective way of generating the kind of problem solving we need. And the second case that we make is that the problems we're facing just can't be tackled in the same old. We've got to have a way of engaging in research that takes on all the different facets of a problem and takes on all of that knowledge. So multiple ways of knowing have to be engaged in the problem solving. Otherwise, we're not generating solutions that are going to be useful and that really get us to where we'd like to go.
Right, thanks. Maybe one last question to Jonas before we open the floor. So impact investment in venture capital world is you know, for science, this is what is this? How do you enter? How do you take part in the dialogue? So can you maybe explain how, you know, the coalition and through the work of a decade, because this is also what we want to open up in the framework of a decade in terms of creating that kind of enabling environment. How can we create the conditions for scientists, for innovators and industry to come together to co-create and deliver solutions?
Wow, that's a big question
I know.
at the end. But let me answer it very simply. I think our number one goal at Catapult is to partner and to collaborate. And once again, all we would like to do is to see our innovators make it. And we need to be connected to research institutes and universities. We need to see new talent come into play. Hence, we're connected to a large and vast network globally to find those opportunities, but also to work with our companies for their best interest. So we're investing in companies that are coming out of research institutes, working together with TTOs, having mentors, professors, working with us when we're researching companies where we're very deep down in the technologies and the science. Desalination, for instance, is a domain that we're investing into nowadays, and we're utilizing the whole community. So it's a collaborative effort. It's a large equation that we need to solve, and various types of funding, various type of smart capital and capital. So I guess we all need to partner up to do that.
All right, let's do it. Okay, thank you. So let's open the floor for questions to our panelists or any intervention. Anybody would like? Yes, we have a volunteer.
I didn't know there were sea urchins in the US. Is that true? Where?
Over 95% of the kelp forest in Northern California has been completely obliterated by the purple urchins. Southern California has had that for about 20 years or so. But the urchin, essentially anywhere where you have active industrial overfishing, you pretty much have urchin barrens.
Okay. Any other questions in the room or online?
Can I just supplement a little?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Currently, Urchinomics is working on a project with the FAO to leverage the urchins that are destroying the kelp forests here in the Mediterranean, and to see if we can turn them into premium seafood products for the market here. I think it's quite relevant given that we're here in Monaco, that sea urchin or Océan is a very premium seafood product that I think could convert itself from a bane of the Mediterranean tourism industry and turn it into one of the world's most premium seafoods.
Thank you very much, Brian. Do you have something?
We have some online questions as well. The first one is for Angela. So you talked a lot about the investment case for why and, you know, how you convince philanthropies and other funders to invest in co-design. But at the other end of the scale, for scientists, where can they start to get funding for co-design? Because it is extra time, it's extra resources, as you said, and it's often hard to find funding for that part of the process.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's actually no easy answer for that yet. I mean, that's part of what my project was designed to do, is to help make that support more accessible and to make it easier within universities and other research institutions to do co-design. Right now, I do know that many universities, at least in the US and elsewhere, are creating ways, mechanisms for researchers to engage in co-design. So there might be, I know of a number of new centers who are have cropped up over the last few years, were explicitly aimed at giving the researchers at that particular university the access to whether it's the local community or other sorts of stakeholders that might have questions in which co-design would be an appropriate approach. So I think there's more, there's more access, but it's still not widespread, which is why we're bringing funders together to help as many funders as we can get the tools that they need, that they can start to invest in this kind of work.
Thank you very much, Angela. I think that's a very important point, and maybe this is something we can try to achieve in the decade to really ensure that those grant-making mechanisms and those funding mechanisms really have a portion of funding attached to co-design, like we have now in communication. 20 years ago in research projects, communication was a 0.1% of the budget of a project proposal. Now it's more because there's a need. So the same thing maybe could be promoted in this context. Another question from Harriet. Over to you, Harriet.
I'm so sorry, I'm very curious today, aren't I? Thank you so much for a really stimulating panel. My question is, how do you avoid tokenism in co-design, not just in research, but in the ways in which research is used and funded? We hear a lot of problems that co-design is something that means different things to different people. Stakeholder consultation can simply reduce people to a tick box rather than actually having that meaningful engagement. So it would be wonderful to hear from your experience, how can you tackle those problems and avoid tokenism to have meaningful collaboration in the design and implementation of these ocean solutions? Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. Angela, would you like to have a go at that one?
Sure, another great question, and one that I don't think is completely sorted. What I do know is there are lots of ways of trying to avoid that and to tackle it head on. One is that there are now agreements that can be formed between the various members of a co-design team, both the researchers, the practitioners, community groups, whoever it is, come to an agreement, sign an agreement, say this is how we're going to work together. We
lost you, Angela. Frozen. 2 minutes. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to another question.
We have another question. First of all, I'd like to, we have a comment from the Blue Economy Desk in the Maldives, who is watching online, who have asked to be put in touch with a couple of the projects and the speakers from the second panel and from the first panel. So we will be doing that. And hello to our colleagues who are watching in the Maldives. It's great to know we've got an international audience. Question for Brian. How does having the Decade endorsement, how does having the Decade logo actually help you with marketing and being able to sell your product? Is this part of the decision making and part of the reason why you wanted to be part of the Decade? Because it helps also promote the environmental sustainability part of your work in your marketing and in the commercial side of things.
I think the UN OceanDecade, as well as, I see Ron back there, the World Economic Forum, have been instrumental in helping to lift the issue of kelp forests into the zeitgeist, or bringing it into the world's attention. Coral reefs right? They're so beautiful. They get a lot of the attention. The money goes there. Kelp, especially brown algae, is kind of like the little brother that doesn't get recognized, but is a tremendous workhorse in the ocean. I would say that the OceanDecade and World Economic Forum have been critical in elevating this issue, which, of course, you know, a rising tide raises all boats, including us. But I think more importantly, we're getting the world to really pay attention to kelp forests, given how critical they are, both in terms of climate change as well as in biodiversity. So in that sense, it's been a very important step for us.
Thank you very much, Brian. Any other questions online or in the room? Yes, at the end of the room.
And I have one more online as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Where do you see the role of more citizen science or crowdsourced in terms of, obviously we've got VC and commercialization and maybe even the co-design if she's back online. Is that part of the puzzle?
I don't think Angela is back online, but I don't know if Brian or Jonas would like to.
Well, I could point back to our case in California. California is probably half of the restoration effort is actually done by citizen scientists, volunteers, sports fishers. It's essentially a community-wide effort to try to restore kelp forests in Northern California. In Japan, it's a fisheries cooperatives, so self-autonomous groups that are essentially becoming stewards of the ocean as opposed to just being a fishing or an extractive effort. So absolutely, I think it's one commercial effort alone is not going to be able to solve it. It has to be a silver buckshot of various solutions, and I think that engaging individuals and communities is going to be a critical piece to actually making a sustainable, meaningful change. So I think my answer is yes, that it's a critical piece of the puzzle.
Okay, right. And from a venture capital point of view, is there enough volume there from the general public, or do you have to be a family office or an investment?
That's a good point, because we are funded primarily by family offices. So we have not engaged with traditional VCs simply because I think the typical VC timelines and what we are trying to do didn't quite entirely match. But yes, I think that it's going to be a mix of different types of funding, as Jonas represents. You know, you got the really hardcore commercial types, and then you're going to have the impact types. You're going to have the philanthropic types. But I think we all have to work together to make it happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jonas, you want to add something? No? Okay, we're good. So we have Angela back online. Sorry, Angela, we lost you for a few minutes. Would you like to finish your intervention, or were you there? We lost you about 1 minute into your answer.
Yeah, I apologize. My home office internet, no problem. I get to the office and then it cuts out on me. I don't know where I ended, but I do think the tokenism question is critical. I also think it goes along with power dynamics, making sure that the relationships and the engagement between all those involved in co-design is appropriately balanced. So I do think those kind of creating formal or informal agreements that give everyone a say in how this works is really important. I also think making sure that at every step that the group involved in co-design is centering the needs of the communities and the policymakers and whoever else is involved in co-design, centering that regular basis. So it does not become research top heavy, but rather it's very balanced.
Right. All right. Alison, you had one more question online.
Sorry, yes, we do have one more online, which is it's for Jonas, and from an NGO working in Africa. I'm very happy to hear that you will be expanding into Africa. But they say they've had some experiences in the past with impact investment and people looking to invest in community-led projects, whether that be in locally managed marine areas or locally managed mangroves or coastal sites. And there's such a big knowledge gap within the NGO community about what impact investing is, what you're looking for, how to respond, how to even negotiate some of the terms and conditions of, term sheets that are put before them in terms of blue carbon. So as you're rolling things out into new areas where there's less experience, are there going to be resources available at a very basic level to help NGOs or communities sort of navigate this very, very new world and this new terminology and pieces of information that are coming at them?
Yeah. Thanks for that. Short answer, yes. We will collaborate, of course, on the ground. And that's a big part of our initiative and why we want to do this. So we've been working on expanding globally and especially on the African continent the past 3 years or so. So we want to be on the ground. We think it matters. We have been sourcing locations, various locations on the African continent, and we're very conscious that it's a lot of differences throughout the continent. So we want to be there. We want to engage with the NGOs. We are partnering with Tony Blair Institute, Smart Africa, and Ocean Impact to grow the ecosystems and awareness. And we would like to educate and to help and give tools for the like-minded that pursuing impact investments. So we would like to share. We would like an open source. We're all about growing the local innovation ecosystem. It's a lot of potential. It's a lot of willingness, and we're just started that journey. On the ocean note, we're also looking into Southeast Asia. We know we got a lot of forces driving us there, and it's a lot of impact to be made there. So that's for next year to come, to be on the ground there as well. But in the same model, to connect, to have the platform, and to help and assist the growing ecosystem. We want to make that happen.
Great, great answer. Thank you. We're going to wrap up soon. Let's make sure we are not missing anything. I have maybe one last question I want to ask actually to the three of you. Because I think we should also talk about, when we talk about financing science and technology, we should talk about blending finances and, you know, mixing the interests of a private sector, of you know, the public, the governmental investments, and philanthropy. Is there any good examples you can highlight in this kind of framing and in collaboration in pursuing a common objective through those mechanisms?
I think Brian said it neatly, and there's a lot of various funding out there, and for me and for us, being a private investor, we welcome it all. We're very conscious that we have a lot of other funding types that would like to be there, co-investing alongside us, and we would like to see more activities from the others as well. For me, we know that we're not going to heavy lift this by ourselves, and as long as we're conscious of that and allow other types of funding come into play, I think that's what's accelerating the innovators.
I think I could talk to two very specific examples of how blended financing has helped us propel. First, when we first learned about the issue about purple urchins in California, we had no idea whether our technology could work. The Nature Conservancy and a philanthropist essentially donated the research funding to be able to validate our tech at UC Davis, and that was what propelled us to be able to launch in California. Same with in Norway. We had an impact investor that had a philanthropic arm. They put in a few €100,000 to validate the concept with us. Worked out quite well, and now we're moving to commercial scale. So there are different ways that I think different funding sources can help out. I think it's often in the catalytic stage. If you can get that initial spark to prove the concept, funding, especially ambitious funders, come afterwards, but without that initial spark, it's pretty hard.
Great, thanks. And Gerard, do you want to add anything on this issue?
I don't have a specific example, but I'll just add that I don't see why pooled funding, combined funding, multiple sources of funding couldn't come together in co-design. There's lots of stages of co-design. There's lots of places, there's lots of junctures where different investments can come together, and there's really no reason that can't work. And I hope that during the decade of oceans, that's one of the things that we see start to happen is multiple sources of funding coming into co-design, and especially as funders have the tools to understand what it is, how they can invest, and what they get out of it.
Great, thank you. And certainly this is something that the Decade is trying to create and open in terms of creating this dialogue amongst different type of funders, whether we're talking about governments, philanthropy, or the private sector. And also financing institutions. I mean, this is also a new area where we are opening also discussions with, with banks and financing institutions, and really to understand what are their needs also in terms of knowledge, and creating a co-design dialogue with those. So that's important. Okay, I think we hitting the end of the road. It's we started a bit late. We'll try to finish on time. So first of all, let me thank our three panelists, Angela, Jonas, and Brian. Big round of applause. Thanks to our audience. I think we have just one slide just to give you some hints on what to do next when it comes to the decade. Yes, how to engage in the OceanDecade. Of course, we have a website which has been a new website since a few months now. We have a global stakeholder forum, and I really invite you to join in. It will take you 30 seconds, but it's really through the stakeholder forum that you will be able to access all of the information, to see who's doing what, and to create collaboration and co-design, as we've been discussing. We have a call for decade actions, which will be launched on 15th April, and just want to remind you, every year we launch 2 call for decade actions on 15th of April and 15th of October. And the topic might be focusing on food security, on blue economy. We'll see. We have a decade board next week, and we will discuss this in more details with our members. But the last call was on climate change, on ecosystem resilience, and marine pollution, just to give you examples. We also have a OceanDecade expert roster, which we are enrolling now, and really inviting expertise in all sort of fields. Remember that ocean science is not just oceanography, it's much bigger than that, and the way it is defined in the decade includes anthropology, includes law, governance, socioeconomics aspects, and so on. So we need a lot of expertise to really achieve the goals of the decade, and this roster will be helping us to set the strategic goals of the decade challenges in reviewing the process of a decade over the 10-year period we have in front of us, and really helping us to really get the objectives and the outcomes we want to achieve. So join. This is open to any experts who have an interest in ocean affairs. I've mentioned the stakeholder forum. We have, of course, follow us on social media on OceanDecade. I want to thank our team in Paris, who has been tweeting like mad in the last couple of hours. And of course, we look forward to see you in Lisbon, the next big stop at the international level, the UN Ocean Conference, which is focusing on science and innovation. Well, here we go. So we look forward to see you there. We will have several decade events there. And we will also be talking about concrete solution and showcasing some of those great actions we've heard about today. So once again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our audience live and in the room. I want to thank the Prince Albert II Foundation and the Monaco Ocean Week for hosting us. Thanks to our technical team here today who really run the show very nicely. And we look forward to see you in the very near future. Thank you very much. Have a good day.